It's the Great Battles of Alexander. I'm playing out the Battle of Gaugamela here. Alexander against Darius, with a cat wanting some attention. Yeah. I'll go and let her out in a minute. This is turn 7, and it's proving to be very eventful. The Persians have broken through over here on the Macedonian left wing, the Persian right. Mazaeus, the wing commander over here, managed to get his heavy cavalry up against some Macedonian light cavalry, punched a hole in the lines, routed a lot of stuff, then got a continuation, and when Craterus tried to trump in this time, it didn't work for him. That allowed Mazaeus to continue rolling up the Macedonian line, and it's all got really, really difficult for the Macedonians out here on the left. Then the other wing commander Bessus out here on the Persian left, the Macedonian right, threw a load of cataphracted heavy cavalry in against some lancers and light cavalry, almost broke it but didn't quite manage to break anything, and then managed to get a continuation. And at that point Alexander had to make the hairiest possible trumping in check. He couldn't afford Parmenion. The Macedonians couldn't afford Parmenion to fail the roll and give Bessus another crack at breaking through, because this stuff is going to break the next time there's shot combat over here. It couldn't allow that to happen, and couldn't afford Parmenion to be finished with half his wing routing. So Alexander has trumped in. He was stationed over here and he's got enough range. He's just moved down and then had a go at rallying all the routing troops. You can see rallied markers around here. He's rallied 4 there were 6 things routing. There's something here that's adjacent to an enemy unit, so can't rally, and he failed with some light cavalry. But he's rallied 4 of the 6 routing units there, and he's now making his way back over to the right wing in preparation for this mess, which is going to continue to develop next turn. And there isn't a lot that he's going to be able to do about it, but he's going to have a go anyway, because he's Alexander the Great. On his way through, I've just rolled, he's got a continuation, he's got 7 orders. He's probably going to throw these peltasts out over here to stiffen the Macedonian lines up here and stop this breakthrough. But the battle just became far more dynamic. It was petering out to a grindy Macedonian win, where they're completely untroubled by this huge low quality army of the Persians. But actually the Persians have just managed to bring some of their highest quality stuff to bear at the same time and with a continuation, and it can do some real damage. I still feel the Macedonians are in, comfortable. Well, they're a lot less comfortable than they were last turn, but they're still in good shape on the route point table. They've got 6 route points to 68 of the Persians, so they're way ahead on that score. But they can't afford to lose that much, whereas you can see lines of unused stuff on the Persian side that as stuff routes they can bring more stuff forward, and that's really dangerous in its own right. Anyway, I'm really pleased we've got a battle on our hands here, 7 turns in, and Alexander having to actually sweat this turn to try and keep his army fighting. As I say, we'll throw these peltasts forward, and then he's got to jog on over to the other side of his army to try and sort this catastrophic situation out. It doesn't look catastrophic because it looks like 2 lines of troops, but these are all going to break the next time. There's some shot combat here, which will be next turn. There's no stopping Bessus from shot combating these troops, and they will all start routing. And at that moment there will be a big gap around this side of the Macedonian flank. So it's up to Alexander to get over there and figure out what he needs to do. So over here on the Macedonian right flank here at the Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander has come in and does what he does. He's here, but he's had 3 activations. So he started off on this side of the board. He's managed to rally a whole bunch of stuff over here, 4 out of the 6 routing units over there, then swung his way over to this side of the board, reorganised these, got some peltasts that were sort of in behind the line of cavalry that had been attacked to swing round in behind the heavy cataphracted cavalry, and their attacker superior when they're attacking in the flank and rear like this. This is a sort of follow-up move. And routed 2 of the 4 heavy cavalry that were causing them so much problems. And one's routed here, one's off the board because some peltasts ran up behind it and hacked it in the back again, threw some javelins at it, and that was the end of that. So there are now just 2 of these heavy cavalry left here, and of course, you know, and some these light cavalry managed to come around and take some chariots out as well that were causing this bunch of heavy cavalry a lot of problems. So with that out of the way, they can now advance forward to a more sensible position and hold this line across here without the chariots there. And yeah, they're just in a far better shape again. You know, it was all falling apart, and Alexander turns up and goes, you do this, you do that, you do the other, and it all looks okay again, and the other side's routing. It's astonishing how that happens. Yeah. So yeah, when you can crank out 21 consecutive orders and the opposition can only do 4, you can get a lot done. So yeah, really. Really incredible turnaround here on the right flank. I don't think Parmenion is going to manage. He's the last leader left to go. I don't think he's going to manage quite the same magic, but of course Alexander's rallied most of his troops, so he can now spend his time doing sort of problem solving and offensive things to try and stabilise his situation here. And he can't have a continuation because of Alexander's trumping in, so he's got his 5 orders and he's got to be quite careful with what he does with them. You can see the situation here is looking quite chaotic, so it's a question of what he can do to sort of stabilise this situation or find any sort of opportunities to exploit. He has got to be wary of some chariots still lurking up here that could make life very nasty for his heavy cavalry, and he'd like to get some infantry or some skirmishers or something up to improve that. But he may just have to live with it for the moment because there doesn't seem to be anything around. Anyway, see what he can do. So here we are at the end of turn 7, start of turn 8 at Gaugamela, Great Battles of Alexander, part of Great Battles of History, blah blah blah. GMT Games, yes, good. About to make the elite activation roll for Alexander. In fact, let's do that now. So the situation was that, you know, Alexander cleared up most of his problem out here on the right flank, drove off that heavy cataphracted cavalry, and he's got the last 2 surrounded, although they are still dangerous and threatening to punch through the things in front of them. Anyway, so there's that situation. Over on this side, you can see a much more stable position here with a fairly good line there, with a slightly disorganised sort of mass of scattered Persian troops in front of him, many of which are in quite dangerous and in good order. There's some chariots out here and assorted bits of heavy cavalry which might come towards him. But he's got a fairly coherent sort of defence, and there isn't much of a gap in here because there's a couple of phalanxes around here waiting to snap shut on anything that tries to get through there. So they're fairly comfortable with this situation. The question is whether Alexander gets his elite orders phase now, because there are a couple of things. Firstly, over here, this heavy cavalry here, if left to its own devices, might be able to charge into this area and and attack into the flanks and rear of these troops, which might get a little bit ugly. So that's the first threat, and Alexander could block that off if he got an elite initiative, because he's got heavy cavalry around here, which he could push up back into this sort of area and close that off. So that's one thing he'd like to deal with. The other thing is that over here, Parmenion, although he managed to reorganise his troops and get them into some sort of defensive shape, he didn't manage any sort of attacking action. And it could be that he'd like Parmenion to take some, to find some offensive moves to try and get onto the flanks of some of this sort of fairly scattered, these fairly scattered units, so that he can start picking them off, try and pick off that heavy cavalry with something, try and pick off this unit with something, and so on. He might quite like Parmenion doing that. So there are a couple of things to get done, and he'd have to make a decision. But let's see if he gets the elite initiative phase. He's rolled a 6, so he does. So it's a question of what he wants to do with it now. I think he's going to let Parmenion fight his own battle and stabilise this situation out here on the right wing. So he's going to take his 7 orders for himself and see what he can't reform, and then shut up this situation. He's got some light cavalry sitting out here just in the wind. He might be able to get some troops to attack further against this heavy cavalry and rout that a bit more and close up this space. So yeah, he's going to take an elite action phase now, and then we'll go into turn 8. So it's the end of turn 8 here at Gaugamela, Great Battles of Alexander by GMT, and the game is following a fairly standard pattern now, which is at the end of each turn, the Macedonians remain in a reasonably well structured defensive position, and there are far fewer Persians on the map, and that's exactly what's happened again here. We have to say that the Macedonian position here on the right is fairly disrupted. You can see all kinds of troops facing all kinds of odd directions, lots of them with cohesion hits. That one's still routing. This is mainly due to the fact that Alexander failed to get any momentum check. He rolled an 8 straight away, and so he only got 7 orders rather than his usual 14 or 21. Otherwise he'd have sorted this out, but he failed his momentum with an 8, and so his troops are still in some disarray, but there's not a lot left on the Persian side to take advantage. A couple of mounted archers here that aren't even shot capable, the leader back here, and some stuff, more archers here, and some heavy cavalry, a single unit of heavy cavalry back there. Other than that, it's down to these block of cataphracted heavy cavalry, which have been joined by some lights and stuff in here. Over on the Macedonian left, the Persian right, it's turning into a rout. Parmenion finally got his act together and unleashed his own heavy cavalry in a counterattack at the Persians, and got a continuation, and yeah, that's all just got very, very messy all of a sudden. There's a couple of chariots and a couple of archers in here that they're not too worried about, because they can't really get in behind the phalanxes here, and so he was able to just launch his line forward and blast his way through heavy cavalry and light cavalry that was facing him. And as you can see, they've got a couple of heavy cavalry bottled up here, some light cavalry in here, which isn't long for the battlefield. This stuff will get surrounded and taken out, and there's just a couple of chariots and a single heavy cavalry up here to mop up. That flank may well have been decided in the next turn or two. That does look like a mopping up exercise, unless this guy suddenly gets the line command he's been waiting for all game and manages to bring those lancers into the fight. If he does get that, then this is back in the balance again, but if Parmenion just gets another turn or two of mopping up and then reorganising his forces, then the Macedonians will have secured the left flank by in all probability. And so what we've got left here is this central portion and this kind of great hammer of this great block of cavalry left that Darius is keeping back to surround and smite anything silly enough to get itself in a position to be whacked. But at the moment, what's happening is that the Persians can't quite coordinate enough troops to make any sort of decisive breakthrough, and then the combination of quality and leadership and ability to rally and reform and get continuations just gives the Macedonians the tactical edge, and they just surround, they survive the initial impact, and then they swarm and surround and flank stuff that's fixed in place by being in a zone of control, and rout it. And the Persians don't have the coordination of forces or the rallying capacity to be able to withstand that. So yeah, that's what's going on here. The Persians in disarray on the Macedonian left, and pretty much gone on the extreme right over here, and just this forced left here, and the bulk of what's left in this line isn't very good. There's a little bit of heavy cavalry and some medium infantry and a bit of hoplite infantry in there, which wouldn't last long against the phalanxes. Some lancers up here, and then the rest of this stuff is low grade. That's archer-like cavalry that isn't shot capable over here, and then you've got skirmishers, bit of light infantry, and skirmishers at the back, and it's all 3 quality, maybe 4s for the bulk of it's 3 quality, which is really poor. So yeah, the Persians really are running out of enough good troops to contest this, and the moment Alexander deals with this cavalry block here, well, the game would be over before then. But even if that is just fixed in place, and he gets one of his wings to crunch into some of this crap over here, it'll rout the Persian army. Rout scores on the doors then for rout points. The Macedonians have 10 rout points, which is some light cavalry and a couple of skirmishers, and the Persians are up to, I'm using a spare counter because I think I've only got 2 of these. Anyway, 103 plays 10. 175 is their limit, and they've got another 3 units leaving the map here unless they get rallied, and they're worth 7, 6 and 5, so 7, 12, 18 points worth there. That would put them somewhere up around 120, and they got 55 points to play with, which isn't very much in the scheme of things. That's 6 or 7, maybe 10 units, and that's their losses so far. So this may well reach a point where I call it before they've actually hit 175 points, if I can't see where they're ever going to get back into the fight. But for now I'm going to push on for another couple of turns.